What's going on, everybody? Um, it's me. Got a little truth for you. Um, just showing real quick. What's in my Google library. A lot of these books, well, all the books I got are free, free download. Only thing about it is you have to be careful in your selection because uh, these books are not just there, unless you have a title. Um, all the books I found just basically by doing simple searches. Um, a few of these are from the 1600s. I think I got a couple from the 1500s. Um, I mean, in total, I think I have about 360 books in my Google library. Of course, I haven't read them all page by page, line by line. Doing some skimming. Good thing about Google is once you get the book open, you can do word searches, things of that nature. Um, but I just want to, you know, come back, uh, give you a little bit more information. I did, uh, I did do a video a couple months ago that uh, did get a whole lot of views. This will probably won't get a whole lot of views either, but I still want at least information out there. Can't keep it to myself. But let's get into it. Um, just wanted to show you some of the books. This one, The History Stir. I don't know what that word is. Commentary. Asignis Maximus and Payne. Um, this is one of those books about ancient history. Of course, that one's in Latin. This is the language that majority of the books were in before, if I'm not mistaken, the 1400s or the 1500s, somewhere around there. Um, but yeah, I got quite a few books. The reason that I've amassed this huge collection of free books on Google, I'll say that again, is because I've been trying to uncover a lot of information about the Jewish nation. You know, I had received a lot of info on, or should I say, I've been seeing a lot of stuff about Black and Hebrew people. And, I'm not the type of person to just follow along with what everyone else is saying. I like to have it firsthand. I like to read it for myself. And like I said, I've found these books, do a little word search through Google, and pretty much everything. I mean, it takes some time. I've been doing this search for over a year, so that's another reason so many um, in this collection. But you see, one of the books. This is one of the big ones that they use to try to justify this trade and keeping the black man as a slave. Um, Josephus. This is a good book. Now, let's see, is this one? No, that's not it. I think this is the one here. Has a lot of information about his travels. Sorry, um, his workings with the Romans, things that he saw, uh, being a Jewish background. But if I'm not mistaken, he was Jew and Greek. Um, so, of course, when the Romans captured him in Jerusalem, he became the historian for the Jews. He's got a lot of valuable information. The book of the Maccabean, um, just a lot of books here. Um, I'm trying to find this book. Oh yeah, Negroland is a real place. Just so you know, there are many books about it out there. Um, the book that I'm looking for, though, yeah, that's some of my kids' books. Um, but it's a book by Leo Africanus. Now, this book, from what I understand, was purchased. Was published in 3 volumes. Now, volume one and volume three, you can still get for free on Google download. But one of the prestigious colleges in America has actually um, copywritten the book. So the second volume, you have to pay quite handsomely to get. Um, and they say if you don't want um, a black man to know something, you hide it in the book. But uh, to move on from that, excuse me, he's just he's one of the first historians to write down his accounts in Africa. So he's referred to a lot in many of the writings of the Europeans. Uh, but yeah, I have quite a few books here. One of my favorite books, and I say favorite because the rhetoric used in the book is, how can I say, it's not prejudice as we know prejudice today, but the prejudice is somewhat like mystifying. The author, he's kind of trying to justify his position, but he, in some instances, doesn't know how to exactly say it. But the title of that book is "The Jew, a Negro," in which he basically is talking about how the Jewish people are Negroes because of the way they handle the cold and things like that in Europe. Of course, he was talking about the lighter skinned Jews because by that time they had been mixed down, excuse me, just as a lot of us here in America have been because of our uh, our ancestors' travels in Europe and between Europe and Africa and that sort of thing. But this book, The Negro, this is one of the most um, distasteful books, in my opinion, because the author is trying to make, excuse me, such a strong case for um, the slave trade that he goes as low as saying that the Negro is not a man, but was an animal that Adam named man, yada, 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 blah, 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 whatever. But the book that I really want to um, give information on today is this book here. Um, Let me see if I can highlight it again. But this book, it's the title of it is For Africa, containing what is of most use in blue, Verenius, Salarius, Cluvarius, Bodrin, Britius, Sanson, and etc., with the discoveries and improvements of the best modern authors of this time. Um, but just want to go over a few things this publisher has included in the book. Um, by the way, the publisher's name is John Nutt. John Nutt was one of the publishers in Europe who uh, did a lot of publishing for legal information, things of that nature. Um, Now, I don't read Roman numeral, so I had to look this Roman numeral up, but this book was actually published in 1717. I'm sorry, 1714. I apologize, 1714. So this book was published approximately 95 years after the first African quote unquote slave was landed in the United States. Just want to go over a few things here. Now, I don't believe my highlights have been saved, so let me see if we can get to the page that I want to start on, page number 3. All right, so um, let's see. I don't know what's going on here. All right, so here it says on page 3, Leo says the ancient Africans. Oh, give me a moment. Okay, that was my highlight. It says Leo says the ancient Africans had stately tempests where they worshiped the sun and fire and always kept the latter burning. Those of Libya and Numidia uh, sacrificed to certain planets, but those of Negro land worshiped the Lord of heaven. Those Africans of Negro land worshiped the Lord of heaven. The Romans divided Africa into six provinces. The sub-consulship containing Carthage and Tunis, which they called Prosper Africa. The consulship of Numidia, containing Sirte, now Constantine. The consulship of Tripoli, containing Tripoli, Mauritania, uh, Casriensit, containing Algiers and Teleson, Mauritania, Tingitana, containing Morocco and Fez, and the diocese of Egypt, containing Libya, Superior and Inferior. I can't make that word out. Augustinica, Arcedeus or Arcedea, and Egypt, properly so called. All right. Now, the other highlight, um, Stephanus enumerates the ancient names of Africa thus: Terra Olympia, Oceania, Assatia, and Extrema, Serif, Hesperia, Ortygia, um, Amonis, Ethiopia, Cyrene, or Orphisa, Libya, Caphania, and Aria, which Cellarius thinks were rather the names of particular countries. And I apologize. This Old English is a little hard to read at times, but to go um, talking about this area of Negro land, if we go to page 39 in this book, this book tells us something about Negro land that um, you don't hear talk about at all, really, unless it's coming from another African American or someone who's not white. Um, but this book uh, makes a statement that I really want to have us look into. Now, this this page 39, it says of modern Africa in general. In the second paragraph, Judaism was the religion of the ancient Africans for a long time and succeeded by Christianity. But Mohammedanism prevailed in the 208th year of the Hijra, when all the Jews, Christians, and professors of the African religion that could be found were put to death. Now, the Hijra is Arabian. That was the time period when um, Muhammad was ran from Arabia because of disputes between his teachings and the people that he called, I can't think of the word right now, but basically those people who didn't agree with him. So they ran him out. Of course, he made his way across Africa, um, and he began his teachings there. And they say in the 208th year of the Hijra, which was approximately around 622 AD. The 200th year would have been approximately 830 AD. Um, but in the 208th year of the Hijra, when all the Jews, Christians, and professors of the African religion that could be found were put to death. Point one that I wanted to address. Islam was not the first religion of Africa. Um, I know, I know we hear that a lot, being African American in America, especially when folks want to detest Christianity. Secondly, Christianity was in Africa long before it made its way to the United States that we call America today. Christianity was a part of Africa. Um, Number three, the point that I want to make, or the most important, in my opinion, is that Judaism was the religion of the ancient Africans for a long time. So Judaism was practiced throughout Africa, not just in uh, certain parts, or not just in the eastern portion of Africa around Egypt, as some would say. Um, to go on further, it says the present Christians in Africa are partly strangers and partly natives, some of them slaves to the Turks and barbarians, and others free. Now, these Christians that they're speaking about are not whites, they are the black Christians, some of them being in Africa the whole time, some of them migrating back to Africa. Some of the Jews who inhabit both sides of the Niger derived themselves from Abraham. Others fled here from Asia when Vespasian destroyed Jerusalem, or from Judea when it was wasted by the Romans, Persians, Saracens, and Christians. Some were banished from Italy in 1342, from Spain in 1462, from the Low Countries in Europe in 1350, from France in 1403, and from England in 1422. These all differ in habit and are divided into several wealthy and numerous tribes, but have no dominion, are despised of all nations, and so abominated by the Turks that they are not admitted to be Mahometans unless first baptized, and then made use of only to receive their customs and gather in their taxes. There's a strong or an important word here, that word being Turks. The Turks are here stated to be the Mahometans. So those Muslims that you see in Arabia, they are descendant of the Turks. Um, so just to move on from there. So we see that this author does plainly state that not only was Judaism one of, or should I say, the first religion of Africa, but he also makes a point to note to us that the Jews that lived around the Niger, if you're not familiar with the Niger River, that's on the west coast of Africa, below the Sahara, um, above Guinea, um, in the fertile land around where Timbuktu used to be. I say used to only because it's not reported on much, but Timbuktu was a real place. And it tells you that these Jews had their locations in parts of Europe throughout history. That explains why our race of people have so many variations of color. We have very, very light skinned Negroes or blacks. We have very, very dark skinned Negroes, all because of different points in history where they were in Africa, in Europe, in Spain, in the Middle East, so on and so forth. So just to move on, because I don't want to be much longer, on page 332, it's going to take me a while to get there. Let's see if we can just skip to it. Page 332, going too far. All right, we'll start at page 329. So Page 329 starts the part of the book entitled, or the chapter of the book entitled Negro Land. Page 332 of the Negro Land passage tells us that Plessis, who obviously was a historical figure, says that the soil produces some cotton and flax, and that their chief merchandise is skins or leather, ivory, ambergris, which I believe to be like a perfume. I honestly I haven't figured that one out, but I believe that's what it is. Gold dust and slaves, which they steal from their neighbors and sell their own children to Europeans, who generally transport them to America to work in the plantations of sugar or tobacco or to till the ground. Now, the reason I wanted to highlight that, because um, in America, we know through history that America got rich off of one major export, which was cotton. To this day, the African Americans detest the thought of cotton fields and working in cotton. But truth of the matter is, this was one of our exports when we lived in Africa. It's just that the Europeans, masters of deception as they are, or were, or should I say were, because I don't want to generalize. I understand that not all European people think the same, or people of European descent have the same motive. So those people who instigated the slave trade, beginning with the Portuguese, they understood that we were good at growing cotton and harvesting cotton, and then not only harvesting but processing cotton into fabric. So they put us into areas that we were already skilled at. That's why you have slaves who worked on farms, who tanned leather, did those types of things for their oppressors. You had those who had crafts, creating things, making extravagant pieces for homes and whatnot. Um, let's see, and then this part here where it says they steal neighbors and sell their own children to Europeans. In the Hebrew Bible, God tells Israel that they are allowed to hire their kin people as servants. The Bible has been translated to say slaves, but the true idea is a servant. See, in the Bible, a servant was one who would work for the master, and he could work to either pay off a debt, to have a place to stay, what have you, what have you. But after 7 years, his kinspeople had the right to pay his debt off. So whatever was left, they could pay it off and free him from servitude. The Bible also talks about if the servant wanted to remain with his master, he had that option. If he had found a wife, he and his wife could leave. He could they could both stay there. If a master had a servant who was a female, and he made a wife out of her, he had to continue to take care of her. These were some of the Hebrew or Jewish laws that are stated in the Old Testament, if I'm not mistaken, around the book of Leviticus and Deuteronomy. Well, Deuteronomy and Leviticus. But I believe that these people who were actually selling their children as slaves thought that they were selling them into a type of indentured servitude. They didn't understand that these people were being transported across the Atlantic, and their bodies pretty much used up, where a lot of them died at early ages or what have you. But to move on, this book has a lot of information. It's nearly, well, you see it here, it's over 800 pages long. But page 336, talking about the land of Meli, um, it tells us that um, this was one of the maritime provinces, so it was one of the areas that was close to the ocean. It says, bound with the ocean on the west, uh, the Basirs and Qautari on the north, the Sufi on the east, and can't make that out, Meg Malaguti on the south, from which is parted by the mountains Sierra Leone and extended 270 miles from northeast to southwest, and 180 where broadest. Leo places this north of Gambia, contrary to the maps, and it extends 300 miles north, but you can read that. Now, Leo says that it abounds with corn, flesh, and cotton. When it says flesh, I'm assuming, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that it's referring to um, uh, farming um, and the trade of meats. Um, but it says that it was also cotton, and it was full of wealthy tradesmen and merchants. Um, it says that there were no colleges, but many temples. The priests and the professors of the law read lectures. The people are more sensible, civil, industrious than all the other Negroes, and turned Mohammedans while they were subject to the uncle of Joseph, king of Morocco, whose posterity continued in the sovereignty till um, Tutia, king of Timbuktu, which is Timbuktu, put them under severe tribute in 1520. So these people were Jewish also, who had converted to Islam or Mohammedanism. Later, um, they were taxed very heavily by the king of Timbuktu, who despised the Jews greatly. It says that the Sanford say that here are many good towns because of the conveniency of one of the branches of the Niger, by which they can transport their dates, grapes, cottons, etc., and that they have a famous college and many doctors of Haley sect, which the youth come to study from all parts of Negro land. Halen misplaces this east of Timbuk. Maury places Mendingo and Sages to the east. So this tells us that not only were we industrious people, but we were people who had culture, we had religion. Um, Not only did we have religion, we had an educational system where parents sent their families to or their children to study. So this is nothing. How can I say the things of America were nothing new to us. It was just the way that it was taught to us. And it goes on to talk about Timbuktu, how the Negroes were Mohammedans or Islamic, but these people were also Jewish. The people of Negro land were Jewish people. Of course, not everybody descended from Abraham, but for the most part, these people were Jewish. Now, this goes back to my previous video. My understanding from reading the Bible is that um, in the Bible, when you read Genesis 10, it tells about what the scholars call the Table of Nations and how the children of Noah settled. It says that Japheth settled in the north. These were the regions of Asia, places above the Caucasus, things like that. And you got to think of it from the position that this was before the world or the land masses separated. We learned, in my generation, we learned of Pangea. Pangea, as they tell us, was one landmass. Um, all people were on the same landmass. The people of Japheth lived in the north. The people of Ham actually lived in the middle, and the people of Shem lived in the south. Now, when things separated, South America and Africa separated. These were still the Shemite people, the people that you found in um, what we call Central America, and the west coast of North America. I believe that maybe even the whole of America were majority Hamite people. And you can tell by their skin color, they're more of a brown skin color. The people of Japheth, who settled in the north, lived in the coldest climates. They are the people who are the lightest of us all. We are all from the same stock. We are all the same people. Um, the Neanderthals, their genetic mutation came about because they didn't have resources. They couldn't eat. Um, they couldn't fish because ice was so thick. They could only scavenge. They were able to survive because their bodies mutated um, into what the old history tells us were quote unquote cavemen because they lived in caves. But they were the same people. Um, Everybody traveled. There was never a time period in the world that people were not travelers. I mean, the Bible tells us about this. And I mean, and I could go on for days on this subject, but one of the fathers, well, the father of the Reformation, when I say the Reformation, excuse me, I'm referring to the Christian Reformation. Um, Martin Luther, he taught that the children of Japheth were a brown skinned people, that the children of Ham were white, and that the children of Shem were black, which are the Africans. Um, and I did my first video before I even read that passage in a book. I'll try to find that book for you before I close out, just so you can read it for yourself. But um, throughout history, you can see how things were. After Pangea separated, um, we find Europe, places of the Caucasus and Asia still had the lightest people. In the Middle East, the Hamites pretty much predominantly reigned. These people were white-skinned people. I know there's a movement going on, and I used to think this too, where everybody in the world had to be black because black was the dominant color, and no other color could come from that. But if you refer back to my other video, Noah himself was an albino. Um, I'm sure his wife was black. His children came out different colors, I'm sure. Whenever you have a mutated gene, it has the capability to mutate into something that actually is sustainable or can sustain life. I'm coming from a biblical standpoint. I honestly believe that the way that the Hamites became light was because of that uh, uh, mutation of the genes. Plus, when you read the Bible and it starts talking about Ham's descendants, it says that Ham had, if I'm not mistaken, 9 or 11 sons. Let's see if I can read the passage to you really quickly. And this is where Hamites, the seed of Ham, began to change. It says that, let's see, the sons of Ham, Cush, Mizraim, Phut, and Canaan. The sons of Cush, Seba, Havilah, and Sabta, Rama, and Sabteka. The sons of Rama, Sheba, Dedan, and Cush begot Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. Nimrod actually, his son settled what's known as Assyria and Nineveh. Those were their places. That's why you can see uh, the historical. Um, I can't think of what it's called right now. I'm trying to rush, but basically, you can see the carvings of the Black Shemite people um, um, uh, present on their monuments and what have you. Um, But anyway, it says that the beginning of the kingdom of Nimrod was Babel, and Erech and Akkad and Calneh in the land of Shinar. Out of the land went forth Asher, Assyria, and builded Nineveh, and the city Rehoboth and Calah. Resting between Nineveh and Calah, the same is a great city. Mizraim, which is Egypt, begot Ludim, Anamim, and Lahibim, and Naphtahim, and Pathrasim and Kalshahim, out of whom came the Philistine and the Caphtorim. These are the Philistines who were in Canaan at the time the Hebrews moved in. And then it says in Canaan, and I did say Ham before, but I meant to say Canaan, begot Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, his secondborn. Now, those are the only two sons it names, but then it names nations, because this is where I believe their countenance changed to white. It says, and the Jebusite and the Amorite and the Girgashite and the Hivite and the Archite and the Sinite and the Arvadite and the Zamorite and the Hamathite, and afterward were the families of the Canaanites spread abroad. All right, now, and the reason I believe this way is because if you read the book of Enoch, when it talks about Noah's birth, it frightened his father so bad that he ran to his father, who sent him to his grandfather, and his grandfather said, "Don't worry, he is your child. He's not a son of the angels. Him and his descendants, they will survive, and they will start a new nation." So the idea of the children being lighter than the parents or its brothers was something that put fear in people who were naturally dark skinned. Now, and that's not something that I've read, but that's my own um, um, understanding of how things operated, and those are my own opinions. Um, Now, it tells about the borders of the Canaanites, but I want to go really quickly to Genesis 15. In Genesis 15, there's a very poignant statement made. We just read that the Amorites were the son of Ham, and clearly they had to be a white-skinned people. But in Genesis 15:12, it says, and when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abraham, and lo, a horror of great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto Abraham, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in the land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. Now, if you go down to verse 16, it says, but in the fourth generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. Now, there are other books in my library, as I showed you, but it talks about the Amorites being the Aryan people who moved across the Middle East. Some believe that they came from India. Others believe that they had their beginnings in the Middle East. But these people moved into Europe. I believe that these Amorite people were the people that the Israelites dispelled from Canaan. They ended up living on the outskirts in Syria. We know that the children of Joseph were given the lands that are right on the border there, being that they were mixed children between the descendants of Mizraim and the Negroes. I believe that they may have been a little lighter. This may be where we get our lighter brothers and sisters who are Latino. Now, I'm not saying that for a fact. These are just some educated guesses that I'm making because of the information that I've just provided you. But I mean, and the Amorites or Aryan people actually first stole the identity of the Jews. If you read the book of Maccabees, you'll see that after the war with the Greek, I can't think of his name right now, but he actually tells Ptolemy that he's back in the land of his progenitor, which means his forefather meaning that he's back home where his father was born in the land of his people. So they won the war against the Jews. He's taken over the throne. These people eventually steal the identity of the Jew. Later in history, when the Roman Catholic Church gets started up, they actually usurp the power of the Roman Church. They bastardize all the teachings of the religion. They start worshiping Mary because she has to be, in their eyes, divine, being the mother of Christ. They start saying that she's white, rosy skin, what have you. But I mean, it's a long story that I don't want to go too far into because I've been here a long time already. But my point for this post altogether was to show that there is historical proof that the Negro in America and in other places of the Americas and other places of the world actually are descendants of Abraham. Um, we were taken from our homeland in Western Africa. There were some Jewish, and there are still Jews who live in South Africa now, who were trafficked by the Arabians through Asia, through India. You have tribes of Black people who are from Africa, who live on the outskirts of these of a lot of their prominent towns, who make very little money and find themselves in a similar situation. Our situation here in America is a bit better than theirs because of the infrastructure, but still yet it's a similar situation. If you go to the islands are full of Negro people. The scripture tells us through the prophets that God will redeem his seed, that he'll bring his children from the four corners of the world and the islands. Another reason I believe that we are the descendants of Abraham, but also that our position as Shemites began in the Middle East. I'm sorry, began in Africa before we trafficked or migrated to the Middle East. Over time, we mix with those people of European descent, which is why a lot of us, if we take genealogy tests and those type of things, we'll find that we have some European ancestry because there was a lot of mixing going on. In 1492, when the Spaniards kicked the Jews and the Moors. Well, they say they kicked the Moors out of Spain because they don't want you to know that not only did they kick the Mohammedans or Islamics out of Spain, they also kicked the Jews out of Spain because they were Black people just as well. King Ferdinand, he actually had set up, as a matter of fact, it's in this book. King Ferdinand knew very well of the African people or should I say, the Jewish people in Negro land. Page 208, if I can get there, I'll read this to you. In this book, let's see. It says, the author says, a great many merchants reside in it, either because it's road to Negroland or because it joins Numidia. When Ferdinand, King of Spain, took Oran and Misalcabor, two of its chief ports, we're talking about Numidia, it provoked the inhabitants to dethrone, I can't make out that name, who was at that time their king. So King Ferdinand, he knew where the Jews were in Africa. So when the Jews were expelled from Spain in 1492, the majority of them had to find ferry ships to take them across the Mediterranean to Africa. Many of them died from starvation. Many of them were plundered. Many of the ship captains actually murdered these men, women, and children on their vessel because they believed that the Jews swallowed their some of their money to bring with them so they'd have something to spend. And they were looking for their money, so they cut these people open and left them to die. Some people starved as they made the voyage or the trip from the coast to Negro land. So, I mean, there's a lot of history. They tell us that the African American has no history, but here, this author has proved very, very distinctly that we have history. Not only do we have history, but our history has been given to us from the beginning, which brings up another point, and then I must go. Um, the reason that we here in America were given the Bible when we got off the slave ship was not because we were given a religion that we didn't know. The reason we were given the Bible is because the Christians thought it was their position to force us to believe who Christ was. To give you a backstory, and many of you may have read this, but many of the Jews did not believe that Christ was the Messiah. The reason for that is because they believed that the Messiah would come as someone who would be in military power and someone who would begin the takeover of the world to take the throne of Israel back and set up his kingdom. So when they detested Christ and they debated the Europeans or the Christians about who Christ was, they made it a point to Christianize, proselytize the Negro into believing that Christ was the Messiah. By now, we do know that he truly was the Messiah. It's prophesied in the Old Testament just as it is in the New. But it's time now for us to begin waking up. I don't believe it's going to be long before things start shaking up where we have to begin moving. And it's important that we already have our things in order so that when it is time to move, we can mobilize, we can have our dynamics together so that we'll be able to survive. The scripture says that we'll go and we'll have many possessions, just as our ancestors did when they left Egypt. But it's not going to make us a bit of difference if we have $1 million or 10 million. If when we get to where Messiah is setting us up, we don't know how to live and prosper. So anyway, my rant is over. If you have any comments, any questions, I'm going to have a comment section here. You can chime in as you like. But dude, thank you for your time. If you stayed with me the entire way. I did say that I was going to take you to this other book if I can get out of this one here. Let's see. Let's see if this is low for me. Let's see. I just want to show you a couple of things. This book here, it has some pictures that I have found to be quite amazing. Let's see. Don't give me nothing. Yes, I did meet Abyssinia. Nope, that's not what I want. Okay. I can't find it, y'all. This book actually has pictures of some Abyssinian Jews. Let me see here. Bear with me. I should have been a little bit more prepared than I am, so I apologize. But kind of got on my soapbox a little early tonight, and I wanted to. I couldn't just let it go. I wanted to share it. This is information that is valuable to our people, just as well as it is to those people um, of the world. Um, let's see. It's important for our white brothers and sisters out there to know that I'm in no way saying that blacks are better than whites. Um, Simply saying that we find ourselves in a position where uh, we've all been duped into believing one thing, when in actuality, it's something else. Um, and we're, like I said before, we are all one people. There's no one nation that's better than the next. Um, and it's time for us to come together. You know, um, we've played this game of I hate you, you hate me. We're different people. Africans are beasts and animals. Um, of course, we have the same faculties. Um, we can save each other. We live by the same means. We both um, eat and share foods and recipes and whatever else. So it's time to put the foolishness aside, because all said and done, we are all brothers. We do have to come together, and there's nothing in this world that we can do apart, regardless of what anyone wants to think. There's nothing that we can do apart from one another. I believe I'm getting close to this picture that I want to show people. The name of this book, though, is The Natural History of Man, Compromising Inquiries into the Modifying Influence of Physical and Moral Agencies on the Different Tribes of the Human Family. Um, and the picture that I'm looking for is the picture that they show a Shemite prisoner. Um, Now, this guy, he's from Assyria. This is a Hamite. Um, he lived in Assyria. Also, I'm to um, kin folks of ours. And if you pay attention, many of the Spaniards of today, um, brown Spaniards, those Assyrian relief that you see from the old time. Um, let's see. You know what? I'm not having the greatest here, and I don't like to say look, because of course I don't live by luck. But I apologize again. Okay, this is an Ottoman Turk. These are the people who currently live, who inhabit. Um, their descendants mixed with the Hebrews or Ishmaelites. Um, this guy right here, he's a Turk. You can tell he's not what they call a white person, or strict European. Um, I believe that I am getting closer, but there are so many books. This is another Turkish person. Um, Summerweed, I don't know where they are, but that's not what I want to show. Um, okay, who's this? This is Chinese. Um, Another Chinese. may not be the book that I thought it was, but it does have some great. Okay, here we go. This fellow, I don't know if you saw this, um, but this fellow is a Nubian. Um, the Nubians lived on the east coast of Africa. Um, we see clearly that he was a black man, or what they call black today. Um, so yeah, I don't believe this is that I'm looking for. It may be, but there's a nice picture of some Jews. Here they are. These are the Jews of Abyssinia. I don't know if I can turn this. Okay, I can't. But these are some Abyssinian Jews. These brothers are old historians called olive skin Jews of Abyssinia. Says that the Abyssinians were mostly Christian. Um, these are the people they said descended from Solomon after the Queen of Sheba went and saw him, and her son went and uh, studied under Solomon and returned with some of Solomon's household. So those are the Abyssinians. Um, see. So what I'm looking for is not in this book, it's the other book that would have those people. Let everybody go. I appreciate you if you stuck it out with me this far. Um, but like I said before, these are some truths that um, we would never otherwise um, have. Um, as a matter of fact, let me see if I can find um, the book or the statement more so from Martin Luther so that you can read it yourself. Uh, World of Wonders. Here we are. Page 149. Well, 148 and 149. All right. So, in this book entitled A World of Wonders with Anecdotes and Opinions Concerning Popular Superstitions, it says the scholiasts have written much which has tended only to render more obscure the origin of the Negro race, some deriving it from Cain and attributing its blackness to divine wrath after the murder of Abel, others from Shem, the son of Noah, which is the opinion of Dr. Hahnemann, as is seen in his Latin treatise upon the color of the descendants of Shem. Now, of course, that Latin treatise has not been translated, so we'll never be able to see it unless we know how to read Latin and we know where to find that book. But it says Hahnemann cites the authority of Luther, referring to Martin Luther, the father of the Reformation, who firmly asserts that the skin of Shem was blackened as punishment for his irreverence. Now, of course, that's not true, but this was his teaching. He knew that the Shemites were black, and he was trying to justify the way they became black. And he quotes as a passage from the learned Euresius, who in his treatise De Tacitus established that the sons of Ham had white skins, those of Japheth a brownish complexion, while those of Shem were black as ebony. And that's again in this book entitled A World of Wonder. So we have the information here. I got to go. I've been recording too long. But I do want to again thank you for your time. I want to thank you for lending me your ear. I do appreciate it. It's been an hour exactly. So if you stuck with me this long, I appreciate it. Shalom, Israel. May we all be healthy, prosperous, and at peace. Um, and you all have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week.